Hello. Today we're going to talk about the Wing Sung Model 618 pen. This pen is sort of a conglomeration of styles. It's a transparent demonstrator pen. It's almost completely transparent. We'll get to that in a minute or two. It has a clip that is somewhat evocative of a Parker Arrow clip, but is a little bit different, but definitely reminiscent of a Parker Arrow clip. It has a cap band that is very much similar to that found on many sailor pens. All around the cap band it says Wing Sung 618 and made in China in large type around the outside of the cap band. It has a piston filler which fills a very large part of the body with ink. We'll get to how much exactly in a minute. And it has a pull to turn piston knob. It has also the piston itself, as you'll see here, is a sort of a double seal piston. If we take a look at the inside of the pen, you can see that the feed and section are fully transparent, fully visible. There's a small black part of the primary feed, but the secondary part of the feed is all transparent. You can see the ink going all the way up until the very tip of the hooded nib, and you can see the ink under the hood and going right up to the tip of the nib. It's actually pretty neat. The nib style is, again, very Parker 51 reminiscent. So we definitely have a sort of conglomeration of pen styles going on here. The cap has a very good inner cap seal. I've kept this pen capped and inked for weeks at a time. Uncap it and it writes straight off. It writes really, really well. This is the transparent model, the clear transparent model. They make the transparent model in colors. This is a transparent blue version, and this here is a solid opaque black version. Let's do a quick size comparison. Here's our Wing Sung 618. Here it is compared to a Lamy Safari. And here it is compared to a Pilot Metropolitan. So you can see these pens are all fairly comparably sized to each other. So let's demonstrate on this pen how you might how the filling mechanism works. You simply pull to release the piston. You can then operate the piston back and forth. And then when the pen is full, you click to turn. There is a little tab and a notch that have to line up with each other, but that's fairly easy to do. To open it, to clean it, it's nice. You only need your two fingers, no special tools or anything. You simply turn the piston knob without unlocking it. That will allow you to remove the entire piston mechanism, and then you can clean, etc. One thing I'm going to do while I happen to have this open, I'm going to do something that you might find odd, but you'll see why in a minute. I am going to measure the diameter of the piston. So the diameter of this piston is, let's see here if we can get this relatively precise. Let's say 7.37 millimeters. You might ask why I'm measuring the diameter of the piston. Again, you'll see that shortly. Let's just write that down so we don't forget. So 7.37 millimeters is the piston diameter. This pen weighs inked 21 grams, so it's sort of an average weight. The material is very nice. It's very solid. It's not doesn't feel like a cheap, fragile material at all. It feels like a very, very heavy-duty, solid plastic material. Very, very well made. In terms of ink capacity, that's why I actually measured the piston diameter. So given that this is a clear demonstrator, we could actually calculate the ink capacity with a fair degree of accuracy. So I'm going to measure from the top of the piston to the end of the ink chamber, and that is pretty much exactly 35 millimeters. So that's a 35 millimeters height. So now we can just do a little bit of math and we can actually calculate the ink volume here. Okay, so we're going to do a little math here to determine our volume of ink. So remember we said our radius, the diameter of our piston, which would also be the diameter of the ink chamber, was 7.37 millimeters. We're going to divide that by 2. That gives us 3.68 millimeters in radius. We already determined that our height was 35. The formula for the volume of a cylinder is pi times the radius squared times the height. So pi is 3.14 approximately. The radius squared, in this case our radius is 3.68, so we're going to square that, is 13.56. And our height is 35. So 13.56 pi, which is 3.14, multiply that by the height, which is 35, is 1,490 cubic millimeters. There are 1,000 cubic millimeters there are 1,000 cubic millimeters per milliliter. So that would give us an ink volume of 1.49 milliliters of ink. So approximately 1.5 milliliters, because one thing we didn't account for in all this measurement was any ink that is inside the feed and not actually in the ink chamber. So one could safely say that the ink capacity of this pen is 1.5 milliliters. I hope you enjoyed our little mathematical diversion. You could only do that, of course, on a demonstrator pen like this, and only on one where you can actually get a good measurement of the diameter of the ink chamber. Because of the way the pen is constructed, I couldn't actually get the calipers into the actual portion of the ink chamber that stores the ink, so we use the diameter of the piston as a substitute for the diameter of the ink chamber, which is good enough for our purposes here. Okay. Let's now do a writing sample and we'll see how that goes. Okay, what we're writing with here today is a Wing Sung Model 618. This nib is approximately a fine nib. I would definitely call it a fine, definitely not an extra fine, but it writes well. It's decently smooth. There's a little bit of feedback, but nothing to complain about. It's an amount of feedback that I actually like and I'm comfortable with. Not the wettest pen in the world, but again, it does write quite well, and I actually like it quite a bit. By the way, this pen incidentally costs $13, so I honestly think for $13 you get an awful lot of pen here for $13. This is quite a good deal indeed. This ink is really one of my favorites, and certainly in terms of names. If you had to think of cool names for an ink, this one might actually win the contest. So this is Noodler's Dragons Napalm. I absolutely love the name of this ink, and I actually like the ink quite a bit. This ink is fairly unusual in that this ink probably has the greatest color variation in terms of lighting differential of any ink that I've seen. The color of this ink varies from a bright pink to a vivid orange, really depending on whether you're on incandescent lighting, LED lighting, different lighting types, etc. So it really varies quite a bit. It's not a particularly wet ink. It dries quite quickly. It really behaves quite well. I really like it. I really like it quite a bit. Again, this is a fairly dry ink on a fairly dry pen, so you're not going to get. As you can see, it's not a particularly wet ink, but I do really like the way it dries. It's obviously not for every occasion. There's definitely certain contexts this ink is going to get you might get some funny looks using this ink. Has a cool artwork on the label, like a lot of Noodler's inks have. Again, you get this nice big 3-ounce bottle, so that's about 90 milliliters of ink for $12 to $14, depending where you buy it. So it's a really good buy. These Noodler's bottles are actually well shaped. They're nice and tall, so you can really dip your pen in. Obviously, the usual caution with Noodler's inks apply. They fill these bottles to the tippy top, so make sure when you open it, especially when it's new, you open it with care. You may actually have a challenge dipping your pen in the ink without overflowing the bottle. They do fill it. That high. What else is there to say? Obviously no flex on this nib. It's a stiff hooded steel nib, but like I said, it does the job, and I like this pen quite a bit. In summary, I'm not sure you're going to get too much better pen for $13 out there. It's a really quite a deal. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you like it, please comment, or even better, subscribe. I'd really like to hear everybody's feedback. And until next time, have a nice day.